Hey guys, and welcome to Boxmining. Today we have a feature project called XFai, and they're diving straight into decentralized finance, and they're solving a lot of core issues that's happening, especially when it comes to trading and exchanges. And something we'll talk about that you guys will probably relate to, which is with a lot of these altcoins, there's very little liquidity. It's sometimes very hard to buy an altcoin. It's difficult, and they're solving directly that. So today we have an interview with the chief scientist, Talent Ramabaya, and he's going to talk a little bit about how he's solving a lot of these problems and disrupting this entire space. So Talent, welcome to the channel. I guess, as a start, like as an intro, can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. At XFai, we're building a whole suite of tools to address a whole set of problems that people are having in DeFi right now. As a start, we're targeting the small to mid-cap sized tokens who are, as we call it, stuck on the centralized exchanges and have a hard time bridging the gap, getting over to the actual DeFi space, to Uniswap, to Balancer, to the other DEXs. And then through that, to get access to the whole other suite of DeFi contracts out there.
So you kind of identify the problem with the market overall, that some coins, it's really hard to buy sometimes. Sometimes you hear a lot of innovation in the space, and then you try to get their coin, access the community, just can't do that. Maybe on a small exchange, and that small exchange has very, very low liquidity, so you can't even buy a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the first step, right? In the life cycle of any good project, you got to buy the token somewhere first. And what's happening is that either you buy it on a centralized exchange or you buy it on a decentralized exchange, such as Uniswap. Generally speaking, if you do it on Uniswap nowadays, unless there's very big liquidity on there, like a lot of money flowing to the project, you end up with a lot of problems, right? High fees, high slippage, you're not getting the price you think you will. And we believe with our tooling, we can solve that all for these tokens.
Got it. And how did you come up with this tooling?
Well, I've been working in this space for a long time myself. Everybody on the team has, either in the traditional finance space or in the current DeFi space. And I've participated and worked with a lot of previously ICO and then liquidity farming projects. So I've been working on that tooling in the background for some time. And I essentially said, wait a second, we got to fix this somehow. And then we got together.
So it kind of came from your experience with working with projects. They came to you with these problems, and then you really said, okay, look, you can have this kind of solution for almost all the products that are coming to you, basically.
Yeah, I mean, in the tech space, you call it dog fooding, right? Essentially, using your own products, using your own tech stack, and that's kind of how it evolved. One step after another. Interestingly enough, it was really all about identifying the problems, because the users who do the farming and who do buy these tokens, a lot of them aren't actually aware of the deeper technical problems behind the scenes that happen, and you got to come up with some really innovative approaches here to solve some of them, right? And I'm really happy to say that we actually came up with methods that are functional in many ways, right? They essentially solve multiple problems with one stroke.
Got it. Okay. And can you tell me about the solution then? So how does this all work?
Sure. So, I mean, let's start out with our own liquidity generation event, which is essentially this new type of farming event, right? We're dog fooding our own product. The way it works from a user perspective is just like traditional farming, if you can call it traditional, considering the age of the space. The user just comes in, but instead of going through like 4 or 5 steps manually and going to Uniswap, swapping, buying the token, providing the LP token, staking, etc. You'd have all of it in one interface with one click, right? So essentially, our contract takes care of all those steps, which normally you would need to do. This has a lot of very cool effects. It essentially stacks the transactions for you. It makes sure you don't make any mistakes because it's all automated. you get the best possible price when you send it in, right? Normally, there's a lot of price slippage. If you don't know what you're doing, you're making mistakes, etc. We don't have a so-called race condition, right? If you've ever participated in a really, really hot farming event, generally what happens is that you send your transaction in, you pay like, I don't know, $100 on Ethereum or more, and then your transaction fails. And you're like, what the hell? What's going on? But the reason why that happened is that 10 other people at the same block interval came in and sent in a transaction, and only 1 or 2 of them actually get in, right? And then they kind of take your spot, and then your transaction fails. Now, with our contract approach, which we call the potentializer, everybody who sends in a transaction during the farming event actually gets in and gets that price which they committed to.
There's a lot of details here. So you're going to be able to use the product for first time during the liquidity event. So I guess I'll ask my basic question. How can you ape into this? Okay. So if I'm ready, you said it's not going to be 5 steps. It's going to be in a short few steps. What do I need to bring? Do I need to bring Ethereum? Do I need to bring USDC? How do I participate? What's the steps involved?
Yeah. So again, this is another really cool innovation on our end. You can use any of 5 stable coins. DAI, USDC, USDT, SUSD. It's essentially 5 stable coins. And it's essentially a multi-pool farming event, right? Which is very special in and of itself. As long as you have any one of them, you can essentially participate in the farming.
Okay, so let's talk about the product. So you have a bunch of products. All of this is made a lot simpler. One of the biggest products you were talking about was to kind of add liquidity to a lot of smaller cap projects. That's kind of the ultimate goal. One of the biggest problems that you're tackling with this project.
Yeah, that's our first product that we're rolling out right after the farming event. We're calling it the DLO, which stands for DEX Liquidity Oracle. And in short, what it does, it essentially removes the inefficiencies between the decentralized exchanges and the centralized exchanges, right? So today, you either have the choice of trading on a centralized exchange or a decentralized exchange, like Uniswap. Ironically, because of the efficiencies and the way, let's say, Uniswap works, a lot of market traders such as arbitrageurs take advantage of those efficiencies, and as a result actually suck money, liquidity out of Uniswap into the centralized exchanges, right? Such as from Uniswap to Binance very often, for example.
So this is something that actually happens on the back end.
Absolutely, because if the tokens aren't liquid on the decentralized exchanges, what we've seen over the past months is that they will never be able to integrate with third-party contracts, right? They will not get listed on Compound or Aave. They won't get a price feed via Chainlink or something, right? Because these are all bricks, they're all stacking together, but the base layer, which is the price discovery, right? The pricing has to be on chain as well, or at least efficient enough. And we believe that we can bring a bunch of more tokens into this ecosystem with our DLO as a result.
Okay, and how does it work? I mean, it sounds great on paper, right? It sounds like it's great. How does that work?
I mean, without getting too technical, what we've come up with is a method to observe and read essentially API data, right? Data coming from the centralized exchanges, looking at the order book, meaning the standing buy and sell orders, and then translating that order book in real time into what we call a synthetic curve, right? So an order book and a Uniswap curve, the way it works, right, aren't really comparable. They're 2 very different things. But we've come up with a method to turn that order book into, or translate it into what it would look like if it was a Uniswap style curve. And then we essentially make the 2 comparable. And then we make it possible for our DLO, for our DEX Liquidity Oracle, to actively manage liquidity on those Uniswap pairs, to bring it either up, to match it up with a centralized exchange, or to remove liquidity on Uniswap, again, to match it up with that centralized exchange. And that way, the arbitrageurs have no way of actually, sucking liquidity out of Uniswap.
Got it. So at the core is basically takes kind of these two worlds, the centralized exchange. It takes data from there, kind of melds it together, makes it compatible with a decentralized exchange, and then it just combines the liquidity together. This way, it kind of defeats some of these strategies that were sucking money out of the market. That kind of defeats that and gives more kind of liquidity to the users, right? So that's kind of giving more to the users on both sides. Now, this sounds all great and all, but how does it work for an individual project? Does a project have to sign up with you?
They don't actually need to sign up with us, meaning there's no like permissioned way of talking to us. The way it works is that really anyone, either the users who hold the tokens or the projects themselves, can send their tokens to our DEX liquidity pools, meaning we set up pools similar to how Aave or Compound works, right, where you can send your tokens to receive an interest rate / APY. For every pair that's out there on the centralized exchanges, we essentially have a threshold, right? And we know what is the minimum amount of liquidity that we need in those pools to be able to efficiently manage their Uniswap pair. And we actually will, so this isn't publicly announced yet, so this is the first, will actually incentivize several of the tokens by making it farmable, right? So even if the threshold isn't reached yet, just because we want to get to that threshold, we will actually give additional XFai tokens on top just to incentivize people to provide the liquidity.
Awesome. So really there's a lot going on here, but at the core of all this, it really looks at what's happening behind the scenes when it comes to trading and really kind of making that centralized exchange order, but taking that coming to decentralized side, giving more liquidity and being a powerhouse in decentralized finance.
But the very cool side effect for us is that once the liquidity is stabilized in Uniswap for these tokens, we can add additional features to the DLO. Specifically, because the DLO is managing the liquidity on behalf of the users, reducing impermanent loss, maximizing transaction fees generated, etc. We can actually on the fly remove most of the arbitrage opportunity in between the Uniswap pairs, right? So, for example, there's arbitrage from the decentralized exchanges to the centralized ones, but there's also arbitrage in between the Uniswap pairs, right? In fact, Uniswap kind of depends on it to be efficient. In our case, that money doesn't flow out of the projects to the arbitrages. Because we're managing the liquidity on behalf of the users, we can actually perform the arbitrage before the swap even happens, which is extremely cool, right? So the arbitrages don't get any of that money. As a result, the arbitrage profits essentially go straight back to the pockets of the liquidity providers. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So this is really back-end stuff. So I mean, all of this is probably stuff that people usually will never see, but you'll definitely feel the effects of it, right? So a lot of times when you're trading on Uniswap, you'll see something like called slippage, which means you'll get less coins for what you're trying to trade. Or there presents to be, or you can expand your market to decrease slippage, but at the same time, what happens is that there's a lot of kind of these third parties kind of like leeching off the system, right? And it kind of reduces the amount of these leeching opportunities and giving that directly back to the market. So the last thing you kind of want to talk about was governance for this whole project, right? Yes. So the token utility and governance, I guess, is tied in together, but how does that work?
Yeah, so on the governance side, this is going to be really unique. So that traditionally, either you vote with your token directly on things like which other token pairs to accept into the protocol, what should be the next features, upgrades, etc. But what's developed over the last year, I would say, is that the interests of the token holders and the interests of the liquidity providers have diverged on most platforms, like Compound, like Aave, like other places. And that's creating a lot of problems, in my opinion. And I think that's actually going to get worse. So I think the best way to actually do governance is by using the LP tokens of Uniswap, the liquidity provisioning tokens, which you get when you provide liquidity to Uniswap for the XFai pairs. So all the people who are participating in our liquidity generation event will also have governance tokens as a result, which is a very unique approach, right? That way we keep the interests of the people who have their money, quote unquote, at risk, and the people who are actually standing to profit 100% aligned, right? And it maximizes the liquidity for our pairs as well.
Got it. So there'll be so that's kind of the uniqueness of this, which is like the voting has to be done via the liquidity pairs instead of just the coins, right? Got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And if people want to get in, so I guess as we close towards the end of the video and how do people participate and what's going to go on. So what's the best way for people to participate in this project?
Go to XFai.com. The whole page will be reserved for the liquidity generation event. You'll see your stablecoin pair there. And with one click, you can participate and be part of the whole thing. It's
how long would this last actually? So it's like is it urgent? You have to be there first hour, or how does that work?
So the entire event will last at least 6 months, like the entire farming duration. Obviously, the earlier you're in, the better an APY you'll actually get, and therefore the more tokens you will get. And because of how we've structured it, we're also minimizing your impermanent loss if you're early in, and therefore the APY is actually better than a comparable APY in another project, which is another really cool part.
Got it. And yeah, I hope to see you guys there. I hope to see how this all works out, because it's actually really exciting to be able to kind of really take a lot of this from centralized exchanges like that liquidity into the DEXs, really support the decentralized finance ecosystem. So definitely thank you, Talent, today for coming on and chatting. Hope you guys, if you guys have any questions for Talent, leave a question down below, or else check out the Telegram and their mediums. And with that, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody. It was awesome. Thanks.